The auditorium was packed with proud families, cameras flashing, and the sound of celebration filling the air. Mary sat in the third row, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching as 18-year-old twins Jake and Sophie walked across the stage to receive their high school diplomas. For 13 years, she had been their mother in every way that mattered. She had packed their lunches, attended every parent-teacher conference, stayed up all night when they were sick, and worked extra hours to pay for their expenses. She had been there for their first steps, first words, and every milestone in between. But as Jake approached the microphone for his valedictorian speech, Mary felt a chill run down her spine. She had helped him practice this speech dozens of times in their living room. She knew every word by heart. Or so she thought. "I want to thank my real mom, Rebecca, for always believing in me," Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers. The words hit Mary like a physical blow. "Even though she couldn't always be there, she never stopped being my mother. And I want to thank Mary, the woman who paid the bills and kept us fed. Without her financial support, none of this would have been possible." The applause was thunderous, but Mary heard nothing except the ringing in her ears. She glanced at her husband Charles, sitting beside her, expecting to see shock or anger on his face. Instead, he was clapping along with everyone else, a proud smile on his lips as if nothing unusual had happened. Sophie took the microphone next. "I echo everything my brother said. Rebecca, you're our real mom and we love you so much. Thank you for giving us life and for being our inspiration. And Mary, thank you for being our financial provider. We know you did your best." Mary's vision blurred, but not from tears of joy. The twins had reduced 13 years of motherhood to a job description. She had been demoted from mother to bank account in front of hundreds of people. She looked around the auditorium and saw confused faces. Other parents were whispering to each other, clearly uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. Rebecca, the twins' biological mother who had abandoned them when they were 5 years old, was sitting in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she accepted the praise. She had reappeared in their lives just 2 years ago, bringing drama and instability, but somehow she had managed to claim the title of real mom, while Mary had been relegated to financial provider. The ceremony continued, but Mary felt like she was watching it from outside her body. When the twins came down from the stage, they ran straight to Rebecca, embracing her tightly while completely ignoring Mary. Charles finally seemed to notice something was wrong. "Mary, are you okay?" he whispered. She turned to look at her husband of 15 years, the man who had brought these children into her life when they were just 5 years old. The man who had promised her they would be a family. The man who had just sat silently while his children publicly humiliated the woman who had raised them. "I'm fine," she said quietly, though they both knew it was a lie. The twins were posing for pictures with Rebecca, their arms around her as if she had been there for every moment of their lives. Other family members approached Mary with awkward congratulations, clearly unsure how to address what had just happened. Some of them avoided eye contact altogether. Mary had spent the last 6 years carefully saving $500,000 for the twins' college education. She had worked overtime, skipped vacations, and denied herself countless luxuries to build their college fund. She had opened the accounts when they were 12, making regular deposits and investing wisely. The twins knew about the fund and had already made plans for expensive universities, confident that their education was secured. As she watched Jake and Sophie continue to lavish attention on Rebecca while ignoring her completely, Mary felt something shift inside her. She had always been a patient woman, someone who put others' needs before her own. But sitting in that auditorium, publicly reduced to nothing more than a wallet, she realized that patience could be mistaken for weakness. Charles placed his hand on her arm. "They're just emotional," he said quietly. "You know they don't mean it like that." But Mary knew better. This wasn't an emotional slip. This was 13 years of taking her for granted finally coming to the surface. The twins had never seen her as their real mother, despite everything she had done for them. She was just the woman who had picked up the pieces when Rebecca left, and now that Rebecca was back, Mary had been discarded like an old toy. The graduation reception was held in the school cafeteria, decorated with balloons and streamers. Mary watched as the twins introduced Rebecca to their friends and teachers as their mother, while she stood alone by the punch bowl. When someone asked about Mary's relationship to the graduates, Jake had simply said, "Oh, that's Mary. She lives with us. Not our stepmother. Not the woman who raised us. Just Mary who lives with us," as if she were a roommate who happened to pay the bills. The final straw came when Sophie was cutting her graduation cake. She handed the first piece to Rebecca, the second to Charles, and then distributed slices to her friends and classmates. Mary stood there empty-handed as her own stepdaughter served cake to strangers before acknowledging her presence. That night, as Mary lay in bed next to Charles, she made a decision that would change everything. The twins wanted Rebecca to be their real mother? Then Rebecca could figure out how to pay for their college education too. Mary had given 13 years of her life to children who saw her as nothing more than a provider. Tomorrow she would show them what life looked like without their financial provider. The $500,000 college fund was in Mary's name, earned with her money and her sacrifices. And she knew exactly who deserved it more than two ungrateful teenagers who had just publicly humiliated the woman who had raised them. The morning after graduation, Mary woke up with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. The sting of public humiliation had been replaced by something colder and more determined. She made breakfast as usual, setting plates for Charles and the twins, but the atmosphere in the house felt different. She felt different. Jake and Sophie stumbled downstairs around 10, still wearing their pajamas and checking their phones. They had stayed out late celebrating with friends, and Mary had heard them come in after midnight, laughing and talking loudly about their future college plans. "Good morning," Mary said, placing pancakes on their plates. Sophie glanced up briefly. "Thanks," she mumbled before returning to her phone. Jake didn't even acknowledge her presence. He was too busy texting someone, probably Rebecca, who had promised to take them shopping for college supplies later that week. Charles appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work. He kissed Mary's cheek as if nothing had happened, as if his children hadn't just publicly reduced his wife to hired help in front of their entire community. "Great ceremony yesterday," he said cheerfully. "The kids did amazing." Mary nodded silently. She had learned long ago that Charles had a remarkable ability to ignore uncomfortable situations, hoping they would resolve themselves. He had done the same thing. When Rebecca first reappeared in their lives, disrupting the stability Mary had worked so hard to create. "Rebecca wants to take us to that new mall today," Sophie announced. "She said she wants to buy us some clothes for college." "That's nice of her," Charles said, completely missing the irony. Rebecca, who had contributed nothing to their upbringing, was now playing the generous mother with money she barely had, while Mary, who had actually provided for them for 13 years, sat silently at her own kitchen table. Mary watched as the twins finished their breakfast without a single word of thanks. They had eaten thousands of meals she had prepared, but somehow they had never learned basic courtesy. When they were younger, she had tried to teach them manners, but Charles had always intervened, saying she was being too strict. "Don't wait up for us," Jake said as he headed toward the stairs. "We'll probably be out late with Mom." The word Mom hit Mary like a slap. For 13 years she had been married to them, never Mom, or Mother, or even stepmom. But Rebecca, who had abandoned them when they needed her most, was immediately elevated to Mom status. After Charles left for work and the twins went upstairs to get ready for their day with Rebecca, Mary sat alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a breakfast she had prepared for people who barely acknowledged her existence. She pulled out her laptop and began researching. She had always been meticulous with finances, and she knew exactly where every penny of the college fund was invested. The money was entirely in her name, earned through her salary as a financial analyst. She had been careful about that from the beginning, wanting to ensure the twins' future was secure regardless of what happened with Charles. Now she realized how wise that decision had been. Mary spent the morning reviewing account statements and investment portfolios. The college fund had grown to $487,000 through careful investing and regular contributions. She had planned to round it up to $500,000 before the twins started college in the fall. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophie, "Going to lunch with Mom. Won't be home for dinner. No, thank you for breakfast." No acknowledgement of the fact that Mary had been planning to cook their favorite meal that evening to continue celebrating their graduation. Just a casual dismissal, as if Mary's feelings and efforts didn't matter. Mary closed her laptop and walked through the house, really looking at it for the first time in months. Every room told the story of her investment in this family. The living room furniture she had picked out and paid for. The family photos where she stood slightly apart from the others, always the outsider trying to fit in. The twins' bedrooms, decorated according to their preferences and furnished with items she had carefully selected and purchased. In Jake's room she found college brochures scattered across his desk. He had been accepted to an expensive private university with a hefty tuition bill. The acceptance letter was propped up against his lamp, a reminder of the future he assumed was guaranteed. Sophie's room was similar, filled with college planning materials and acceptance letters from equally expensive schools. Both twins had chosen prestigious universities without considering the cost. confident that their college fund would cover everything. Mary had never told them exactly how much money was in their college accounts, but they knew it was substantial. They had made their college choices based on the assumption that money was no object, that their financial provider would ensure their dreams came true regardless of the cost. As she stood in Sophie's room, Mary noticed something that made her stomach turn. On the dresser, next to photos of friends and classmates, was a new framed picture from the graduation ceremony. It showed Sophie hugging Rebecca, both of them smiling radiantly. Mary was nowhere to be seen in the photo, despite having been standing just a few feet away when it was taken. She had been erased from their moment of triumph, cropped out of their happiness like an unwanted stranger who had accidentally wandered into the frame. That evening, Mary sat alone at the dining room table, eating the dinner she had prepared for 4 people. Charles had called to say he was working late, and the twins were still out with Rebecca, probably at some expensive restaurant that Mary would end up paying for indirectly through Charles's credit card. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text that included her, Charles, and the twins. Rebecca had sent a photo of herself with Jake and Sophie at a fancy steakhouse, with the caption, "Celebrating my baby's graduation. So proud to be their mom." Mary stared at the photo. The twins looked happier than she had seen them in months, basking in Rebecca's attention and praise. Charles responded with heart emojis and congratulations. Mary said nothing. But she had seen enough. The message was clear. Rebecca was the mother, Charles was the father, and Mary was just the woman who lived in their house and paid their bills. Tomorrow she would begin the process of transferring every penny of the college fund to someone who would actually appreciate it. Someone who understood the value of sacrifice and hard work. Someone who deserved a chance at the education that Jake and Sophie took for granted. The twins wanted Rebecca to be their real mother? Then Rebecca could figure out how to finance their future. Mary was done being taken for granted by people who saw her as nothing more than a bank account with legs. Mary spent Sunday morning in her home office, a small room that Charles and the twins rarely entered. It was her sanctuary, filled with financial documents, investment statements, and the careful records she had maintained throughout their marriage. As a financial analyst, she understood money in ways that Charles never had, and she had always been the one responsible for the family's long-term planning. The twins were still sleeping off their celebration with Rebecca, and Charles was playing golf with his colleagues, leaving Mary alone with her thoughts and her computer. She pulled up the college fund accounts, studying the numbers that represented 13 years of sacrifice and careful planning. The fund was divided between 2 accounts, one for each twin with $243,500 in each. Mary had opened these accounts when the twins were 12, making regular contributions from her salary while Charles focused on day-to-day expenses. She had researched the best investment options, monitored the accounts carefully, and celebrated silently each time the balance grew. But as she looked at the numbers now, Mary realized that the twins had never once asked her about the accounts or thanked her for maintaining them. They knew the money existed, but they had never shown curiosity about how it had been accumulated or what sacrifices had been made to build it. Mary opened a new browser window and began researching something that had been on her mind since the graduation ceremony. Charles had a niece, Isabella, who was the same age as the twins. Isabella's father was Charles's younger brother, who had died in a car accident 3 years earlier. Her mother struggled to make ends meet, working 2 jobs to support Isabella and her younger sister. Mary had met Isabella several times at family gatherings, and she had always been impressed by the young woman's intelligence and determination. Unlike Jake and Sophie, Isabella was grateful for every opportunity and worked hard to earn what she received. She had graduated as salutatorian from her public high school, earning a full academic scholarship to the state university. But the scholarship only covered tuition, leaving Isabella to figure out how to pay for room, board, books, and living expenses. Mary remembered the last family barbecue, where Isabella had quietly mentioned that she might have to defer college for a year to work and save money. While Jake and Sophie complained about which expensive universities to choose from, Isabella was worried about affording the basic costs of a state school education. The contrast was striking. Jake and Sophie had everything handed to them but showed no appreciation. Isabella had almost nothing but was grateful for every small blessing. Mary pulled up Isabella's social media profiles, not to spy, but to learn more about this young woman who might be more deserving of the opportunities that Jake and Sophie took for granted. What she found confirmed her growing conviction. Isabella's posts were about her academic achievements, her part-time job at a local bookstore, and her volunteer work at a literacy center. She shared articles about financial literacy and posted study tips for other students. Her graduation photos showed her hugging her mother, with genuine captions about how grateful she was for her mother's sacrifices. There were no entitled demands or complaints about what she didn't have. Instead, Isabella's posts radiated appreciation for what she did have and determination to make the most of every opportunity. Mary found Isabella's college acceptance letter, which the young woman had posted with pride despite the financial challenges it represented. Isabella had been accepted to the State University's honors program, a significant achievement that would open doors to graduate school and career opportunities. But she would need financial support to take advantage of this opportunity. As Mary read Isabella's posts, she thought about the conversation she had overheard between Jake and Sophie the previous evening. They had been complaining that their college fund might not be enough to cover all their expenses, wondering if Mary could contribute additional money for spring break trips and study abroad programs. They weren't just taking the $487,000 for granted. They were already planning to ask for more. Mary closed the social media windows and opened her banking software. She began the process of calculating exactly how much money Isabella would need for 4 years of college, including room, board, books, and reasonable living expenses. The total came to approximately $80,000, a fraction of what Jake and Sophie expected to spend on their education. With $487,000, Isabella could not only complete her undergraduate degree debt-free but also pursue graduate school, study abroad, or start a business. The money that Jake and Sophie saw as their birthright could transform Isabella's entire life. Mary spent the rest of the morning researching the legal requirements for transferring the college fund. Since the money was entirely in her name and had been earned through her salary, she had complete control over how it was distributed. There were no legal obligations to Jake and Sophie, no binding agreements that required her to fund their education. She had created the college fund out of love and a sense of responsibility, but love and responsibility were supposed to flow both ways. After 13 years of giving everything and receiving nothing but entitlement in return, Mary realized that she had been enabling their behavior rather than helping them grow into grateful, responsible adults. The twins had made their choice at the graduation ceremony. They had chosen Rebecca as their mother and reduced Mary to a financial provider. If that was truly how they saw her, then they shouldn't be surprised when she made decisions based on financial logic rather than maternal emotion. Isabella deserved a chance at the education that money could provide. She had earned it through hard work, gratitude, and determination. Jake and Sophie had earned nothing through their entitlement and disrespect. Mary closed her laptop and walked downstairs to find the twins finally awake, sitting at the kitchen table and eating cereal while scrolling through their phones. They didn't look up when she entered the room. "Good morning," Mary said. Sophie grunted something that might have been a greeting. Jake said nothing. Mary poured herself a cup of coffee and watched them for a moment. These were the children she had raised, the young adults she had sacrificed for, the people she had loved unconditionally for 13 years. And they couldn't even be bothered to say good morning to her in her own kitchen. Her decision was made. Tomorrow she would begin the process of transferring the college fund to Isabella. It was time to give the money to someone who would appreciate it, someone who understood that opportunities were gifts to be treasured, not entitlements to be taken for granted. Jake looked up from his phone long enough to make a request. "Can you give me some cash? Rebecca wants to take us to that new restaurant downtown and I'm broke." Mary stared at him for a long moment. Even now, after everything that had happened, he still saw her as nothing more than an ATM. The audacity was breathtaking. "I'll think about it," Mary said quietly. Jake frowned, clearly surprised that she hadn't immediately reached for her wallet. But Mary was done being the family bank account. Tomorrow she would start the process of giving their college money to someone who deserved it. The twins wanted Rebecca to be their mother? Then Rebecca could figure out how to pay for dinner. Monday morning arrived with unusual clarity for Mary. While Charles hurried through his morning routine and the twins slept in, she sat in her home office with a cup of coffee and a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Today she would begin the research necessary to transfer the college fund to Isabella. But first she needed to learn more about Charles's niece. Mary realized that despite attending family gatherings together, she had never really talked with Isabella one-on-one. The young woman had always been quiet at family events, overshadowed by Jake and Sophie's louder personalities and their tendency to dominate conversations. Mary started by calling Charles's sister-in-law, Amanda, Isabella's mother. It was a risky move since Amanda might mention the call to Charles, but Mary needed information that she couldn't find online. "Mary. What a surprise," Amanda said when she answered the phone. "How are you doing? I heard the twins graduated. That must be so exciting." "Yes, it was quite an event," Mary said carefully. "Actually, I'm calling because I've been thinking about Isabella. How is she doing with her college planning? There was a pause, and Mary could hear the exhaustion in Amanda's voice when she responded. She's doing well academically, but I'm worried about the financial side. The scholarship covers tuition, but everything else, it's going to be tight. Really tight. What does she need for the first year? Room and board is about $15,000, then there are books, supplies, a meal plan she'll need to supplement the basic one that's included. Isabella calculated she needs about $22,000 for the first year, and that's being conservative. She's been working at the bookstore, but even with her savings, we're looking at maybe half of what she needs. Mary did quick math in her head. Isabella needed less for 4 years of college than Jake and Sophie expected to spend on 1 year at their expensive private universities. Has she considered student loans? She's trying to avoid them if possible. Isabella watched her older cousin struggle with debt for years after graduation. She'd rather defer college and work for a year than start her adult life owing money. Mary felt her heart break a little. Here was a young woman so responsible and forward-thinking that she was willing to delay her education to avoid debt, while Jake and Sophie had never even asked about the cost of their college choices. Amanda, would you mind if I talked to Isabella directly? I might have some suggestions for her. Of course. Actually, she's working at the bookstore today. Morrison's Books on 5th Street. She'd love to hear from you. After ending the call, Mary drove across town to Morrison's Books, a small independent bookstore in the college district. She found Isabella behind the counter, helping a customer find a specific novel. Mary waited until the customer left, then approached. Isabella? I'm Mary Charles's wife. We've met at family gatherings. Isabella's face lit up with genuine warmth. Of course. Hi, Mary. What brings you here? Mary had prepared a story about looking for a book recommendation, but faced with Isabella's sincere smile, she decided on honesty. I heard you're starting college in the fall. I wanted to hear about your plans. Isabella's expression grew more serious, but her enthusiasm remained. I'm starting at State University in the honors program. I'm majoring in education with a minor in literacy studies. My goal is to become a high school English teacher. That's wonderful. Your mother mentioned you're managing the financial planning yourself. Isabella nodded, and Mary caught a glimpse of worry in her eyes. It's challenging, but I'm figuring it out. I've been working here part-time and saving everything I can. I might need to take out a small loan for the first year, but I'm hoping to work on campus to minimize debt. Mary looked around the bookstore, noting how organized and clean Isabella kept her workspace. Even while talking, the young woman was straightening displays and helping customers. Her work ethic was obvious. Isabella, can I ask you something personal? What does college mean to you? The young woman's eyes grew bright with passion. It means everything. After my dad died, I watched my mom struggle to support us. Education is the one thing that can change our family situation permanently. I want to become a teacher not just for the job security, but because I believe education can break cycles of poverty and limited opportunity. Mary felt tears threatening. Here was a young woman who understood exactly what education could do for her life, who saw college as an opportunity rather than an entitlement. When I earn my degree, I'll be the first person in my family to graduate from college, Isabella continued. My mom dropped out of high school when she had my older sister, and my dad never had the chance to go beyond high school either. This degree isn't just for me, it's proof that our family can achieve more than we ever thought possible. Mary thought about Jake and Sophie, who had never once expressed gratitude for their educational opportunities or acknowledged the significance of what college could mean for their futures. They saw expensive universities as their right, not as privileges to be earned and cherished. Isabella, what would you do if someone offered to pay for your entire college education? Room, board, books, everything? Isabella laughed, but not mockingly. That would be incredible, but I don't expect miracles. I believe in working for what I want. If someone were generous enough to help with part of my expenses, I'd be grateful beyond words, but I wouldn't want to take charity. I'd want to earn it somehow. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was an investment in someone who would use the opportunity well? Isabella looked puzzled. I'm not sure I understand. Mary realized she was getting ahead of herself. I'm just curious about how you think about these things. You seem very mature in your approach to planning your future. They talked for another 20 minutes, with Isabella showing Mary some of the education textbooks she had been reading in preparation for college. Her knowledge was impressive, and her dedication was obvious. This was a young woman who would make the most of every opportunity given to her. As Mary prepared to leave, Isabella said something that solidified her decision. You know, Mary, I've always admired how you supported Jake and Sophie through school. I know it wasn't easy raising teenagers who weren't biologically yours, but you did such a good job with them. They're lucky to have had your guidance. Mary almost laughed at the irony. Isabella, who had barely interacted with the twins, saw Mary's role more clearly than Jake and Sophie did after 13 years. Thank you, Isabella. That means more than you know. Driving home, Mary felt certain that she was making the right choice. Isabella deserved the opportunities that the college fund could provide. She would use the money wisely, appreciate the gift, and make something meaningful of her education. Jake and Sophie saw college as a 4-year party funded by their financial provider. Isabella saw it as a chance to transform her life and break generational patterns of limited opportunity. The choice was obvious. Tomorrow, Mary would begin the legal process of transferring the fund to Isabella. It was time to invest in someone who would truly value the gift. Tuesday morning, Mary woke up with the kind of determination she hadn't felt since starting her career 15 years earlier. While Charles showered and the twins continued sleeping, she reviewed the financial documents she had organized the night before. Every bank statement, every investment record, every piece of evidence that proved the college fund was entirely her money, earned through her work and saved through her sacrifice. Her first stop was the bank where the college accounts were held. Mary had been banking there for over a decade, and the manager, Patricia Williams, knew her well. Good morning, Mary. What can I help you with today? I need to make some changes to the college accounts I have here. I want to transfer the funds to a different beneficiary. Patricia pulled up the accounts on her computer. I see 2 accounts here, each with approximately $243,500. These are in your name only, so you have complete authority to make changes. What kind of transfer are you looking to make? Mary had anticipated this question and come prepared. I want to close both accounts and consolidate the funds into a single account for a new beneficiary. I'll need help setting up an education fund for my husband's niece, Isabella Martinez. Patricia nodded and began pulling up the necessary forms. That's definitely something we can do. Since you're the sole owner of these accounts, there shouldn't be any complications. Will the new beneficiary be aware of the transfer? Not initially. I want to set up the account first, then present it to her as a gift. For the next hour, Mary worked with Patricia to close Jake and Sophie's college accounts and establish a new education fund for Isabella. The process was surprisingly straightforward, requiring only Mary's signature and Isabella's social security number, which Amanda had provided when Mary called that morning under the pretense of updating family contact information. The transfer will be complete by Thursday, Patricia explained. The new account will have $487,000 available for educational expenses. Isabella is quite fortunate to have someone like you looking out for her future. Mary signed the final documents with steady hands. She's earned it. Next, Mary drove to her attorney's office. She had used Elizabeth Chen for various legal matters over the years, including the prenuptial agreement she had insisted on before marrying Charles. Elizabeth had always been thorough and discreet, exactly what Mary needed now. Mary, good to see you. How can I help today? I need to document a large financial gift I'm making to my husband's niece. I want to ensure everything is legal and properly recorded. Elizabeth listened as Mary explained the situation, asking careful questions about the source of the funds and Mary's legal right to transfer them. Since the money is entirely yours, earned through your salary and saved in accounts bearing only your name, you have complete legal authority to distribute it as you see fit, Elizabeth confirmed. However, I recommend we prepare a gift letter and documentation to protect both you and Isabella from any future complications. They spent the next hour drafting documents that would legally establish the gift and protect both parties. Elizabeth also prepared a letter explaining the terms of the educational fund, outlining that the money was to be used specifically for Isabella's college and graduate school expenses. This is quite generous, Elizabeth observed as she reviewed the paperwork. Isabella must be very special to you. She is. She represents everything I wish I had seen more of in the children I raised. Mary's final stop was the investment firm where she managed her retirement portfolio. She wanted to move the educational fund into investments that would grow over Isabella's 4 years of college, potentially providing enough money for graduate school as well. The financial advisor, Robert Kim, was impressed by the size of the transfer. This is a substantial educational fund. Isabella will have opportunities that most students can only dream of. That's exactly what I want for her. By Wednesday afternoon, all the paperwork was complete. The college fund that had been designated for Jake and Sophie now belonged to Isabella, though she didn't know it yet. Mary had also prepared a comprehensive letter explaining the gift and her expectations for how it should be used. Thursday morning, Mary received confirmation that the transfer was complete. Isabella Martinez now had access to $487,000 for her educational expenses, enough to complete both undergraduate and graduate degrees without any financial stress. Mary sat in her home office, looking at the empty account statements for Jake and Sophie's former college funds. The twins were still sleeping at 11 in the morning, probably assuming they had months to figure out their final college preparations. Charles was at work, unaware that the financial foundation of his children's future had just been removed. Mary felt no guilt, only a sense of rightness that she hadn't experienced in years. The money was going to someone who would appreciate it, someone who understood its value, someone who would use it to build a better life rather than fund 4 years of expensive partying. She drafted an email to Isabella, asking if they could meet for coffee that afternoon. She wanted to present the gift in person, to see Isabella's reaction and to explain her expectations for how the money should be used. Isabella responded within an hour, agreeing to meet at a small cafe near the bookstore where she worked. Mary spent the afternoon preparing what she would say, how she would explain this life-changing gift to a young woman who had never expected such generosity. At 4 o'clock, Mary walked into the cafe carrying a folder with all the documentation of Isabella's new educational fund. She was about to change a deserving young woman's life forever, using money that had originally been intended for 2 ungrateful teenagers who had publicly humiliated her just 4 days earlier. The irony was perfect. Jake and Sophie had rejected her as their mother, reducing her to nothing more than a financial provider. Now they would learn what life looked like when that financial provider decided to invest in someone else. Isabella was already at a corner table, having ordered coffee for both of them. Her genuine smile and obvious appreciation for Mary taking time to meet with her confirmed every decision Mary had made over the past 4 days. "Thank you for reaching out," Isabella said as Mary joined her. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the bookstore. Did you have other questions about my college plans?" Mary opened the folder and pulled out the gift letter. "Actually, Isabella, I have something for you. Something that I hope will change your life." Isabella's expression grew curious as Mary slid the documents across the table. "What is this?" "Read it carefully. Take your time." Mary watched as Isabella's eyes moved across the page, seeing the exact moment when the young woman realized what she was reading. Isabella's face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. "Mary, I don't understand. This says you've given me almost $500,000 for college." "That's exactly what it says." Isabella looked up, tears forming in her eyes. "But why?" "I mean, I'm grateful beyond words, but I don't understand why you would do this for me." Mary reached across the table and touched Isabella's hand gently. "Because you understand what education means. Because you're grateful for opportunities instead of expecting them. Because you see college as a chance to build something better, not just 4 years of expensive fun." "But this is so much money. I could never repay you." "I don't want you to repay me. I want you to use this gift to become the teacher you dream of being. I want you to break the cycle of financial struggle in your family. I want you to prove that investing in the right person can change everything." Isabella was crying now, but they were tears of joy and disbelief. "Mary, this changes everything. I was so worried about taking out loans, about working multiple jobs during college. Now I can focus completely on my studies. That's exactly what I want. You deserve to experience college the way it should be experienced, as an opportunity to grow and learn, not as a financial burden to survive." Isabella wiped her eyes and looked at the documents again. "I promise you I won't waste this. I'll make you proud. You already have." Friday evening, Mary drove to Isabella's house to have dinner with her and Amanda. Isabella had called her mother immediately after their coffee meeting, and Amanda had insisted on cooking a special meal to thank Mary for her incredible generosity. The Martinez family lived in a small but tidy house in an older neighborhood. Amanda greeted Mary at the door with tears in her eyes and a hug that lasted several seconds. "Mary, I don't know how to thank you. What you've done for Isabella, it's going to change our entire family's future." Isabella appeared behind her mother, practically glowing with excitement. "Mary, I've been reading about the honors program requirements and looking at graduate school options. I can't believe I can actually plan for all of this now." Over dinner, Mary listened as Isabella shared her dreams and plans. The young woman had already researched summer internship programs that would enhance her education credentials. She had looked into study abroad opportunities that would help her become a better teacher. She had even started thinking about graduate school programs that would allow her to specialize in working with at-risk students. "I want to teach in schools like the one I attended," Isabella explained. "Public schools in lower-income areas where kids need advocates and encouragement. With this education fund, I can afford to take a teaching job based on where I can make the most difference, not just where the pay is highest." Amanda smiled proudly at her daughter. Isabella has always been like this. Even as a little girl, she wanted to help other people succeed. Mary thought about Jake and Sophie, who had never once mentioned wanting to use their education to help others. Their college plans revolved around social experiences, prestigious degrees that would impress people, and careers chosen primarily for earning potential. "Mary," Isabella said, setting down her fork, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Why did you choose me for this gift? I know you've been supporting Jake and Sophie's education for years. This money, it was meant for them, wasn't it?" Mary had prepared for this question, but she still paused before answering. She didn't want to badmouth the twins, but Isabella deserved honesty. The money was originally saved for Jake and Sophie's college education. But after their graduation ceremony, I realized that they don't appreciate opportunities the way you do. They see education as something they're entitled to, not something they've earned. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I met them a few times at family gatherings. They seemed different from how I approach things. Very different. You understand that education is a privilege. You're grateful for opportunities. You have plans to use your degree to make a positive difference in the world. That's exactly the kind of person who deserves this kind of support." Amanda reached over and squeezed Mary's hand. "You've given Isabella something more valuable than money. You've given her the freedom to pursue her dreams without compromise." After dinner, Isabella showed Mary her room, which was filled with books, study materials, and college planning documents. Unlike Jake and Sophie's rooms, which were cluttered with expensive electronics and designer clothes, Isabella's space reflected her priorities and values. "I've been keeping a journal since my dad died," Isabella said, pulling out a worn notebook. "I write down things I'm grateful for every day. Today's entry is going to be pretty amazing." She opened to a recent page and read aloud, "June 10th, grateful for Mom working late to buy my textbooks, getting my work schedule at the bookstore, the customer who left me a $5 tip, and finding a used copy of the Teaching Methods book I need for $20 instead of $80. Mary felt her heart break a little. Isabella was grateful for things that Jake and Sophie would consider insignificant. June 11th, grateful for Mary's incredible life-changing gift, the opportunity to attend college without financial stress, the chance to focus completely on becoming the best teacher I can be, and the reminder that there are people in the world who believe in investing in others' dreams. Isabella closed the journal and looked at Mary seriously. "I promise you I'll write about this gift and what I do with it for the rest of my life. This isn't just money to me. It's proof that someone believes I'm worth investing in." Mary hugged Isabella tightly, feeling more maternal pride than she had experienced in years. This was what it felt like to invest in someone who truly appreciated and deserved support. Driving home that evening, Mary felt lighter than she had in months. The money she had saved through years of sacrifice was now in the hands of someone who would use it wisely and gratefully. Isabella would attend college, become an excellent teacher, and probably spend her career helping other young people achieve their dreams. Meanwhile, Jake and Sophie still had no idea that their college fund no longer existed. They were probably at Rebecca's house, making expensive plans for their freshman year and assuming that Mary would continue to be their silent financial supporter. Tomorrow they would learn otherwise. Mary pulled into her driveway and saw lights on in the twins' bedrooms. They were probably online, shopping for dorm room furniture or planning spring break trips they expected her to fund. Charles's car was in the garage, meaning he was home from his business dinner. Inside the house, Mary found Charles in the living room watching television. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up from the screen. "Very productive," Mary said. "I made some important financial decisions." Charles nodded absently, more interested in his show than in Mary's activities. His indifference no longer bothered her. She had found someone who appreciated her generosity and would use it to build something meaningful. The twins were both upstairs, probably assuming that their college money was safely waiting for them in accounts they had never bothered to ask about or thank her for maintaining. By Monday they would discover otherwise. Mary went to bed that night feeling more satisfied than she had in years. She had finally invested her money in someone who deserved it. Monday morning arrived with unusual energy in the house. Jake and Sophie were both up early, excited about their appointments with their respective college financial aid offices. They had scheduled phone calls to finalize their aid packages and discuss payment plans for the fall semester. Mary sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and watching them bustle around with their paperwork and laptops. They had been talking all weekend about their college plans, discussing dorm room essentials and class schedules with the confidence of young people who had never doubted their financial security. Mom said she might help us with some of the extra expenses, Sophie was saying to Jake as they prepared for their calls. You know, like spring break trips and study abroad programs. Mary assumed Mom referred to Rebecca, though she doubted Rebecca had the financial resources to support such expensive extras. Charles appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for work. Big day for college planning, he said cheerfully, kissing Mary's cheek. I'm sure everything will work out fine with the financial aid offices. Mary nodded silently. Charles had always assumed that the college fund would handle everything, but he had never asked for details about the accounts or shown interest in the financial planning she had done. Mary, can you print out the college fund statements for us? Jake asked, not looking up from his laptop. The financial aid office wants to see proof of available funds. I'll see what I can do, Mary said quietly. Sophie looked up from her phone. Also, we'll probably need you to sign some forms about transferring money from the accounts. The bursar's office said they need authorization from the account holder. Mary felt a moment of dark satisfaction. They were about to learn that making demands of their financial provider was no longer possible. At 9 o'clock, Jake made his call to the financial aid office while Sophie waited her turn. Mary could hear his side of the conversation from the kitchen. Yes, I have a college fund that should cover most of my expenses. No, I don't have the exact balance, but it's substantial. My stepmother manages the account. I can get you those documents this afternoon. He hung up and turned to Mary. They need the account statements and transfer forms by tomorrow. Can you email those to me? Jake, we need to talk about the college fund. Something in Mary's tone made both twins look up from their laptops. What about it? Sophie asked. Mary had practiced this moment, but facing their expectant faces still felt surreal. The college fund no longer exists. The silence in the kitchen was complete. Jake stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. What do you mean it doesn't exist? Sophie asked slowly. I transferred the money to someone else. Someone who deserves it more than you do. Jake's face went pale. You can't do that. That's our college money. You've been saving it for us since we were kids. I saved it while you took it for granted. I earned it while you showed no appreciation. I maintained it while you reduced me to nothing more than a bank account. Sophie stood up, her voice rising. You can't just take our college money. We have acceptance letters. We have housing deposits. We have plans. Plans you made without ever thanking me for making them possible. Plans you assumed I would fund while treating me like hired help. Charles appeared in the kitchen doorway, drawn by the raised voices. What's going on here? Mary stole our college money? Jake shouted. She gave it away. Charles looked confused. Mary, what are they talking about? I transferred their college fund to Isabella, your niece. She'll use it to become a teacher and make something meaningful of her life. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stared at Mary as if he had never seen her before. You gave our kids college money to Isabella? He asked quietly. It was my money, Charles. I earned it, I saved it, and I had every right to give it to someone who would appreciate it. Sophie started crying. This isn't fair. We've been planning our whole futures around that money. Maybe you should have planned some gratitude around that money too, Mary said calmly. Jake pulled out his phone. I'm calling Mom. She'll help us figure this out. Mary almost smiled. Yes, call Rebecca. Ask your real mom to pay for your college education. The twins both started talking at once, their voices overlapping in panic and anger. Charles stood frozen, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. How much was in the account? He finally asked. $487,000. Charles sat down heavily in a kitchen chair. Mary, that's their entire future. No, Charles. That was money I saved through 13 years of sacrifice for children who publicly humiliated me and reduced me to a job description. Their future is whatever they make of it, just like Isabella will make something of hers. Sophie was on her phone now, probably calling Rebecca. Jake was frantically opening his laptop, as if he could somehow access accounts that no longer existed. The financial aid office is expecting documentation this afternoon, Jake said desperately. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. Tell them you'll need to apply for student loans like millions of other students do. But we chose expensive schools because we thought we had the college fund. Sophie cried. Maybe you should have chosen schools based on what you could afford rather than what you expected me to provide. Charles looked at Mary with an expression she had never seen before. Mary, I can't believe you did this without talking to me. Like you talked to me before sitting silently while your children humiliated me at their graduation? Like you talked to me before allowing them to call Rebecca their real mom, and reduce me to the woman who paid the bills. The kitchen erupted in arguments and recriminations. The twins were panicking about their college plans. Charles was trying to understand how his wife had dismantled their children's future without consulting him. And Mary sat calmly in the middle of it all, finally free from the burden of supporting people who had never appreciated her sacrifices. She had given the money to someone who deserved it. Someone who would use it to build a better life. Someone who had thanked her with tears of gratitude instead of entitled demands for more. The twins could call Rebecca, apply for loans, or choose less expensive schools. They were about to learn what life looked like when their financial provider decided to invest in someone else. The chaos in the kitchen continued for another hour. Sophie had reached Rebecca, who promised to figure something out, but offered no concrete solutions. Jake had called the financial aid office to explain that his college fund was no longer available, resulting in a frantic discussion about alternative funding options. Charles sat at the kitchen table, staring at Mary as if she were a stranger. I still can't believe you did this without talking to me first. When did you plan to talk to me about your children calling me the woman who paid the bills in front of hundreds of people? Mary asked calmly. They were emotional. It was graduation day. It was 13 years of honest feelings finally coming to the surface. They don't see me as their mother, Charles. They never have. I was just the bank account that funded their lives. Sophie hung up her phone and turned to Mary with desperate eyes. Rebecca said she'll try to help, but she doesn't have that kind of money. You have to give us our college fund back. It's not your college fund anymore. It belongs to Isabella now. Jake was typing frantically on his laptop, probably researching student loan options and suddenly realizing how expensive his college choice actually was. I can't get enough loans to cover everything, he said, panic rising in his voice. The private university costs $53,000 a year. Without the college fund, I can't afford it. Then choose a different school, Mary said simply. But I already put down deposits. I already made plans. Everyone knows I'm going there. Everyone also heard you call me the woman who paid the bills, so I think your reputation can survive changing schools. Sophie was crying harder now. Mary, please. I know we hurt your feelings at graduation, but we can apologize. We can do better. Just give us our money back. Mary looked at the young woman she had raised since she was 5 years old. Sophie was beautiful, intelligent, and completely unable to understand that actions had consequences. Sophie, you didn't hurt my feelings. You revealed your true feelings. There's a difference. Charles finally spoke up. Mary, they're right. They can apologize and do better. This seems like an extreme reaction to one bad day. Mary turned to face her husband fully. Charles, it wasn't one bad day. It was the culmination of 13 years of taking me for granted. When was the last time either of them thanked me for anything? When was the last time they showed appreciation for the sacrifices I made for their benefit? Charles opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He couldn't think of an example. When was the last time you stood up for me when they were disrespectful? When was the last time you reminded them that I wasn't obligated to support them financially? Again, Charles had no answer. Jake looked up from his laptop with tears in his eyes. Mary, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please give us another chance. Mary studied his face, seeing genuine distress but uncertain whether it came from regret or from fear about his financial situation. Jake, what exactly are you sorry for? For hurting your feelings at graduation. What specifically did you do that hurt my feelings? Jake looked confused. We called you the woman who paid the bills? And why was that hurtful? Because you wanted us to call you something else? Mary realized that even in his apology, Jake didn't understand what he had done wrong. He was sorry that his actions had negative consequences for him, but he didn't grasp why his words had been hurtful. Jake, you reduced 13 years of motherhood to a job description. You called Rebecca your real mom, while describing me as your financial provider. You made it clear that my only value to you was monetary. Sophie wiped her eyes. But we didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? Sophie struggled to find words. We love you too. You're important to us too. Important how? You take care of us. You help us with things. Mary shook her head sadly. Sophie still couldn't articulate any relationship with Mary that didn't involve Mary providing something for her benefit. Charles was growing more frustrated. Mary, they're teenagers. They don't always express themselves perfectly. That doesn't mean you should destroy their futures. I'm not destroying their futures. I'm giving them the same opportunities that millions of other students have, the opportunity to work for what they want instead of having it handed to them. But Isabella gets it handed to her. Jake protested. Isabella has worked part-time since she was 14. She's volunteered at literacy centers. She's maintained perfect grades while helping support her family. She's earned the opportunities I'm giving her. We maintain good grades too. Sophie argued. Yes, you did. While living in a comfortable house, eating meals I prepared, wearing clothes I bought, and never working a part-time job or contributing to household expenses. Your achievements came with every possible advantage, while Isabella's came despite significant challenges. The argument continued for another hour, with the twins alternating between anger, bargaining, and tearful pleas. Charles tried multiple approaches to convince Mary to reconsider, from logical arguments to emotional appeals to barely veiled threats about the future of their marriage. But Mary remained calm and resolute. She had made her decision based on 13 years of observation and one moment of devastating clarity. The twins had shown her who they really were and how they really saw her. Isabella had shown her what gratitude and appreciation looked like. Finally, exhausted by the circular arguments and emotional outbursts, Mary stood up from the kitchen table. I'm going to work, she announced. When I come home tonight, I expect everyone to have accepted that this decision is final. The college fund belongs to Isabella now. You can spend your energy figuring out your new reality instead of trying to change mine. As she gathered her purse and car keys, Sophie made one last desperate plea. Mary, if you do this, we'll never forgive you. Mary paused at the kitchen door and looked back at the young woman she had raised. Sophie, you never appreciated me when I was giving you everything. Your forgiveness now that I've stopped wouldn't mean much anyway. She left the house to the sound of renewed crying and Charles calling after her. But for the first time in years, Mary felt completely at peace with her choices. The money was with someone who deserved it. The ungrateful children who had taken her for granted were finally learning what life looked like without their financial provider. And Mary was free from the burden of supporting people who saw her as nothing more than a bank account. By Wednesday, the full scope of the twins' financial crisis had become clear. Jake and Sophie spent the entire day on the phone with financial aid offices, loan companies, and college administrators, trying to figure out how to salvage their college plans without the fund they had taken for granted. Mary came home from work to find Charles waiting for her in the living room, looking older than she had ever seen him. Mary, we need to talk. She sat down across from him, noting the formal distance between them that had developed over the past few days. The twins can't afford their colleges without the fund, Charles said quietly. Jake would need to borrow over $200,000 for 4 years. Sophie's situation is similar. They're looking at debt that would take them decades to repay. Then they should choose less expensive schools. It's too late for that. Enrollment deadlines have passed. They'd have to defer for a year and reapply to state schools. Mary felt no sympathy. Isabella was prepared to defer her education to work and save money. If it's good enough for her, it should be good enough for them. Charles leaned forward, his voice strained. Mary, these are my children. I know they hurt you, but they're 18 years old. They make mistakes. This punishment doesn't fit what they did. This isn't punishment, Charles. It's natural consequences. They showed me exactly how they value my contribution to their lives. I responded accordingly. By destroying their futures? By investing in someone who will appreciate the opportunity. Isabella will use that money to become a teacher, to help other students succeed, to break cycles of poverty in her family. What were Jake and Sophie planning to do with their expensive educations? Charles was quiet for a moment. Jake wants to major in business. Sophie is thinking about communications. And what do they plan to do with those degrees? Jake talks about working in finance, making a lot of money. Sophie isn't sure yet. Mary nodded. So Jake wants to use my money to position himself to make more money, and Sophie has no real plans at all. Meanwhile, Isabella has a clear vision of using her education to help other people succeed. Charles stood up and began pacing. Mary, I understand you're hurt, but you're punishing them for being typical teenagers. Most kids their age are self-centered and don't fully appreciate their parents' sacrifices. Then maybe more parents should stop enabling that behavior and start requiring gratitude and respect. By taking away their college money? By giving their college money to someone who has earned it. Charles stopped pacing and stared at her. I don't even recognize you anymore. The Mary the first married wouldn't have done something this cruel. Mary felt a flash of anger. The Mary you married also wouldn't have been publicly humiliated by your children while you sat silently and did nothing to defend her. I talked to them about that. They know it was wrong. You talked to them after I transferred the money? Where was that conversation 13 years ago? Where was it last month when Sophie told her friends I was just their dad's wife? Where was it when Jake introduced me to his girlfriend as the woman who lives with us? Charles looked uncomfortable. I didn't know they were saying things like that. Because you never paid attention to how they treated me. You were content to let me be the ATM as long as the bills got paid and the kids got what they wanted. They were interrupted by the sound of crying from upstairs. Sophie had been having emotional breakdowns regularly since Monday, alternating between rage and despair as the reality of her situation sank in. She's been like this for 3 days, Charles said quietly. Jake is barely speaking to anyone. Rebecca has been calling constantly, but she can't offer any real help. Mary felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of sitting in that graduation audience, listening to the children she had raised dismiss her as irrelevant. They'll figure it out, she said finally. Millions of students attend college without wealthy step-parents funding their educations. Jake and Sophie are smart and capable. They'll find a way. What if they don't? What if this ruins their chances at success? Mary thought about Isabella, who had been prepared to defer college and work for a year rather than take on excessive debt. Then they'll learn the same lessons that other young people learn about working for what they want and making responsible financial choices. Charles sat down heavily. Mary, I'm asking you one more time. Please reconsider this. If not for the kids, then for our marriage. This decision is tearing our family apart. Mary looked at her husband of 15 years, seeing clearly for the first time how different their priorities were. Charles, they tore our family apart when they publicly declared that I wasn't really part of it. I'm just responding to information they gave me. So you're willing to destroy our marriage over this? I'm willing to stop pretending that I'm valued in this family when all the evidence suggests otherwise. Charles was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. If you don't give them their college money back, I don't know if our marriage can survive this. Mary felt surprisingly calm facing this ultimatum. Charles, if our marriage was based on my willingness to fund your children's lives while accepting their disrespect, then maybe it was never as strong as I thought. That evening, Mary received a text from Isabella. Started my college orientation materials today. I can't believe I get to focus completely on learning instead of worrying about money. Thank you for changing my life. The contrast between Isabella's gratitude and the twins' entitled demands was stark. Mary had made the right choice regardless of the cost to her relationship with Charles and his children. Upstairs, she could hear Sophie on the phone with Rebecca, probably asking her real mom to solve the financial crisis that Mary had created. Jake was researching student loans and community college options, finally facing the reality that his expensive university choice had been a luxury he couldn't afford without Mary's support. Mary felt no regret. She had invested her money in someone who would use it wisely and appreciate the gift. The twins were learning valuable lessons about consequences, gratitude, and the difference between wants and needs. Their reactions to losing the college fund had confirmed everything Mary believed about their character. Instead of reflection and genuine apology, they had offered manipulation and empty promises to do better. Instead of taking responsibility for their hurtful behavior, they had focused entirely on how Mary's response affected them. Isabella, meanwhile, was already thinking about how to use her educational opportunities to help other people succeed. Mary had chosen wisely. 3 months later, Mary sat in a coffee shop near Isabella's university campus, listening to the young woman excitedly describe her first semester classes. Isabella was thriving in the honors program, earning perfect grades while also volunteering as a tutor for struggling students. I'm taking an extra education class this semester, Isabella explained, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. It's about teaching methods for at-risk students. I want to be prepared to work in challenging schools where I can make the biggest difference. Mary smiled, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from investing in someone who truly appreciated and used opportunities well. How are you finding the workload? Challenging but manageable. Since I don't have to work part-time to pay for expenses, I can devote all my energy to studying and volunteering. It's amazing what a difference that makes. Over the past 3 months, Mary had received regular updates from Isabella about her college experience. Every email and text reflected genuine gratitude and thoughtful use of the educational opportunities Mary had provided. Isabella had joined study groups to help other students, volunteered at local literacy centers, and maintained a perfect GPA while building relationships with professors who were already discussing graduate school recommendations. "Mary, I have something to show you," Isabella said, pulling out her phone. "I've been documenting my college experience in a photo journal, and I wanted you to see how your gift is being used." The photos showed Isabella in various academic settings, studying in the library, participating in education seminars, tutoring younger students, and volunteering at community events. Each image captured a young woman who was making the most of every opportunity. "This is wonderful, Isabella. You're exactly the kind of student I hoped you would become." Isabella's expression grew more serious. "Mary, I need you to know that I think about your generosity every single day. This education isn't just changing my life, it's going to change the lives of every student I teach for the next 30 years. Mary felt tears threatening. This was what investment in the right person looked like, not just immediate gratitude but long-term impact that would ripple through generations. "Have you heard anything about Jake and Sophie?" Isabella asked carefully. Mary nodded. The twins had ultimately enrolled in the local community college, a decision that had sparked weeks of arguments and tears. Jake was studying general business while working part-time at a retail store, learning for the first time what it meant to balance work and school. Sophie had chosen a communications program but was struggling with the adjustment to paying her own expenses and earning her grades without the comfortable buffer she had always enjoyed. "They're both attending community college now," Mary explained. "It's been a difficult adjustment, but they're learning valuable lessons about responsibility and hard work." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I'm sure that's hard for everyone. But maybe it will help them appreciate opportunities more in the future." Mary was struck by Isabella's wisdom and compassion. Even knowing that their loss had been her gain, Isabella could empathize with Jake and Sophie's situation without resentment or gloating. "Isabella, can I ask you something? Do you ever feel guilty about receiving money that was originally intended for them?" Isabella considered the question carefully. "I felt conflicted at first," she admitted. "But then I realized that you made this decision based on how we each approached opportunities and showed gratitude. I can't control what Jake and Sophie did or didn't do, but I can control how I use the gift you've given me." "And how are you using it?" "To become the best teacher possible, to help break cycles of educational disadvantage, and to prove that investing in the right person can create positive change that extends far beyond the original investment." Mary felt overwhelming pride in this young woman who had become more like a daughter to her than Jake and Sophie had ever been. "Mary, there's something else I want to tell you," Isabella continued. "I've started a small scholarship fund with part of my work-study earnings. It's tiny now, but I want to help other students who are in the situation I was in before you helped me." Mary was speechless. Isabella was already using her good fortune to help others, embodying exactly the values and priorities that had convinced Mary to transfer the college fund in the first place. "You're remarkable, Isabella. Your parents would be so proud of the young woman you've become." Isabella smiled, but Mary could see tears in her eyes. "I hope so. And I hope you know that you've become like a second mother to me. The kind of mother who believes in her children and invests in their dreams." After leaving the coffee shop, Mary drove back to the house she still shared with Charles, though their relationship had grown increasingly strained over the past few months. Charles had alternated between angry ultimatums and sullen silence, unable to forgive Mary for what he saw as a betrayal of his children. The twins rarely spoke to her anymore. When they were home from community college, they treated her with cold politeness, clearly hoping that their obvious displeasure would convince her to reverse her decision. Sophie had moved in with Rebecca temporarily, while Jake split his time between his mother's apartment and Charles's house. Mary found Charles in the living room reviewing bills and looking stressed. The twins' community college tuition and expenses were straining the family budget in ways they had never experienced when Mary's college fund was expected to handle everything. "How was your visit with Isabella?" Charles asked without looking up. "She's doing beautifully. Perfect grades, volunteering, already thinking about how to help other students succeed." Charles made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. He had long since stopped engaging in conversations about Isabella's success, finding it too painful to compare with his own children's struggles. "Charles, we need to talk about our future," Mary said, sitting down across from him. He looked up and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "What about it? This situation isn't improving. You resent me for transferring the college fund. The twins barely acknowledge my existence. I don't think any of us are happy with how things are now." Charles set down his papers. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" Mary had been thinking about this possibility for weeks, but hearing the word out loud still felt jarring. I'm saying we need to acknowledge that our marriage was built on assumptions that turned out to be false. What assumptions? That your children would eventually see me as family. That you would prioritize our relationship alongside your relationship with them. That I could earn their respect and appreciation through years of support and sacrifice. Charles was quiet for a long moment. And now? Now I know that Jake and Sophie will never see me as anything more than their father's wife. You will always prioritize their feelings over mine. And I found someone who actually appreciates and values what I have to offer. Isabella. Yes. Isabella sees me as a mentor, a supporter, someone worth investing in. She treats me with the respect and gratitude that I never received from your children. Charles stood up and walked to the window. So you're choosing her over us. I'm choosing to invest my time and energy in relationships that are mutual and appreciative rather than one-sided and taken for granted. They talked for another hour, both of them acknowledging what had become obvious over the past few months. Their marriage had been built on Mary's willingness to support Charles's children while accepting their indifference. Once that dynamic changed, they had little foundation left to build on. 6 months later, Mary was sitting in her new apartment, smaller but perfectly suited to her needs, reading an email from Isabella about her plans for student teaching. The young woman was preparing to work in an inner-city high school, excited about the opportunity to make a difference in students' lives. Mary's divorce from Charles had been relatively amicable, though painful. She had kept her retirement savings and half of their shared assets. Charles had kept the house and responsibility for supporting Jake and Sophie through their community college educations. The twins had not contacted Mary since she moved out, though she occasionally heard updates through other family members. Jake was doing better in community college than anyone had expected, apparently motivated by having to work for his education rather than having it provided. Sophie was struggling more but slowly learning the lessons that Mary had tried to teach through example for 13 years. Rebecca had proven unable to provide the financial support she had promised, leaving Charles to handle the twins' expenses alone. Mary felt no satisfaction in this development, but she wasn't surprised either. Mary's relationship with Isabella had grown stronger, filling the maternal role that Mary had always hoped to have with Jake and Sophie. Isabella called regularly, visited during school breaks, and treated Mary with the love and respect that she had never received from the twins. 2 years after the graduation ceremony that had changed everything, Mary received an invitation that brought tears to her eyes. Isabella was graduating summa cum laude from the education program and had specifically requested that Mary attend as her honored guest. "You're the reason I'm here," Isabella had written in her invitation. "You believed in me when I couldn't afford to believe in myself. I want you there when I walk across that stage to receive the degree that will let me spend my life helping other students achieve their dreams." Mary sat in the front row of Isabella's graduation ceremony, watching as the young woman she had invested in received not only her bachelor's degree but also several academic awards for excellence in education and community service. When Isabella gave her graduation speech as class valedictorian, she spoke about the power of believing in others and investing in their potential. "2 years ago, someone saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself," Isabella said, looking directly at Mary. "That person taught me that education is not just about what we achieve for ourselves, but about what we do with those achievements to lift others up. Today, I commit to spending my career proving that her investment in me was worthwhile." After the ceremony, Isabella ran to Mary first, embracing her with genuine joy and gratitude. "Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for showing me what it means to invest in someone's future." Mary felt the deep satisfaction that came from making a decision based on values rather than obligation. Isabella had used every opportunity well, graduated with honors, and was already making plans to teach in underserved communities where she could make the biggest difference. "I have something for you," Isabella said, pulling out a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photo of Isabella with a group of elementary students she had been tutoring throughout college. The inscription read, "To Mary, who taught me that the greatest gift we can give someone is the belief that they can achieve more than they ever thought possible. Thank you for changing not just my life, but the lives of every student I will teach." Mary looked at the photo and saw the ripple effects of her decision. Isabella would go on to teach hundreds of students over her career, inspiring them and helping them succeed in ways that would create positive change for generations. The money Mary had transferred from Jake and Sophie's college fund would ultimately benefit countless young people who needed advocates and mentors. Meanwhile, Jake and Sophie had completed their community college programs and were both working full-time while attending state universities part-time. The experience of earning their education had matured them in ways that Mary's financial support never could have. They were learning the value of hard work, the satisfaction of earning what they achieved, and the importance of gratitude for opportunities. Charles had occasionally reached out to Mary, usually around holidays or family events, but their conversations were polite and distant. He had never admitted that Mary's decision might have been justified, but he had stopped arguing that it was wrong. Rebecca had faded from the twins' lives again when it became clear that she couldn't provide the financial support she had promised. Jake and Sophie had learned the difficult lesson that their real mom was only interested in being their mother when it was convenient and required no sacrifice on her part. Mary's new life was smaller in some ways but richer in others. She had downsized her lifestyle, traveling less and spending more modestly, but she had gained something more valuable: relationships based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation. Isabella had become the daughter Mary had always hoped to have, someone who valued education, showed gratitude for opportunities, and was committed to using her success to help others. Their relationship was built on shared values rather than obligation, making it stronger and more meaningful than the forced family dynamic Mary had endured for 13 years. As Mary drove home from Isabella's graduation, she reflected on the decision that had seemed so dramatic and controversial 2 years earlier. She had been accused of being cruel, vindictive, and destructive. But looking at Isabella's success and the positive impact that success would have on countless future students, Mary knew she had made the right choice. She had invested her money in someone who deserved it, someone who appreciated it, and someone who would use it to make the world a better place. The twins had learned valuable lessons about consequences, respect, and the difference between entitlement and earning opportunities. Most importantly, Mary had learned that she didn't have to accept being taken for granted or reduced to a financial role in other people's lives. She deserved relationships built on mutual respect and appreciation, and she had found that with Isabella. The graduation ceremony where Jake and Sophie had called her the woman who paid the bills had been the end of one chapter of Mary's life. Isabella's graduation, where she was honored as the person who had made it all possible, marked the beginning of a much better one. Mary's phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Thank you for being there today. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for showing me what unconditional support looks like. I love you." Mary smiled and texted back, "I love you too, sweetheart. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." For the first time in years, Mary felt like her love and support were truly appreciated. She had found her real family, not through marriage or obligation, but through shared values, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's success and happiness. The college fund had gone to exactly the right person. Mary had no regrets about her decision, only gratitude that she had been brave enough to make it when the alternative was continuing to accept being undervalued and taken for granted. Isabella was living proof that investing in the right person for the right reasons could create positive change that extended far beyond the original gift. And Mary was living proof that it was never too late to choose relationships that honored your worth and appreciated your contributions. The story that had begun with public humiliation had ended with private satisfaction, genuine love, and the knowledge that sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most meaningful outcomes.